Still driving back. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Welcome. I'm still driving back from work. I can't believe how dark it is outside. Welcome to the November CAC meeting. Katie, I'll just turn it over to you so you can get us started and launched.
Yeah, so I don't think we need to do formal introductions today. I think everyone has been on a CAC call before, so welcome back. But we can open it to public comment if anyone from the public has a Lake Champlain related comment they'd like to make and raise to the CAC. Okay, hearing none, I think we can shift the chair's update to later on in the agenda. If Denise has any major updates she wants to share with the committee, she can do that when she's in a better position. The next item on the agenda is to review and vote on the draft October 7th meeting summary. Lori?
Yeah, I just have a correction to recommend for number 3. And in the update, that last sentence, no public updates yet on how ANR and AFN will handle the EPA ag enforcement request. I would change that to directive. It's not a request, it is a corrective action directive to the Agency of Natural Resources.
Certainly make that change.
Thank you.
I don't know if I have Denise's power to call for a motion, so maybe
call for a motion.
I'll make a motion, Katie, to accept the minutes from the last meeting.
As corrected, just a clarification.
As amended, yeah.
Thank you.
Very nice. Do we have a second?
This is Andrew. I'm a second the minutes as amended.
Great.
All those in favor or any further discussion? Sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Extensions?
I have to abstain, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Okay. So it sounds like the motion carried. Lori's that a fresh hand or is that? Okay, great. And just wanted to recognize Cree's comment in the chat that the UVM Water Resource Institute's Water Connect seminars at 3:30 on Mondays are excellent. I second that. I've been on a couple of those, so if can drop a link to that during this meeting, and if folks are able to check those out there, there's a lot of good info. With that, we can hand it over to Joe from the Lake George Park Commission to present about the Lake George Septic Inspection Program. This is a topic that I think everyone has heard a little bit about through the different basin program channels, but it'll be great for the Vermont CAC to have their own presentation about this. So Joe, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. Appreciate you having me. Let's see if I can share my screen here and show you presentation. Let's see. Can you see that?
Still in the PowerPoint view mode.
Oh, maybe I got it on the wrong screen. Let me try the other screen. Maybe I shared the wrong screen. Here we go. How about that?
That's better. Yep.
Sweet. All right. Well, thanks again for having me. We like reaching out and talking with other folks that are working on water quality issues. And so it's always nice to be able to join other groups and share what we've been working on, and also to learn, what other folks are up to. So frequent topic of conversation lately for us has been this wastewater program that's been keeping us plenty busy here in the Lake George watershed. I'll give you a little general background on septic systems and how they work, the planning process that the commission went through to kind of come up with these new standards, these new regulations, how inspections actually work, what we're actually looking for out in the field. Of course, our inspection results are always of great interest. And then next steps, what happens after an inspection. And I couldn't help but put this picture in here. This is a hauler who is considering going down and checking out the inside of this tank. I always put this in as kind of a teaser. I have another slide of this guy at the end of the presentation where you can find out if he made it this far and decided this was a terrible idea and got out, or if the next photo is going to be him totally in the tank. So you can stay tuned for that, if nothing else, in the next 30 minutes or so. So general background on septic systems, right? This is not new technology. It's been around for a long time. And it was designed to protect public health, right? And it's very common throughout the United States, particularly in rural areas, with up to, I think it's 25% of US households using septic systems, so pretty common. And despite how long the technology's been around, the standards are relatively new, right? We didn't get standardized design until about the 1970s for tank size and leach field size and appropriate site characteristics. And as I noted, this is developed for public health, right? And septic systems are very protective of public health, including pathogens, bacteria, and viruses. But the commission's regulations direct us, ECL, Environmental Conservation Law, specifically directs the commission to look at the environment, right? To look at water quality, protect surface waters and groundwaters, and also directs the commission to study and monitor and inspect for pollution from any source in the park. So with that sort of as the backdrop, our 10-member board of commissioners started to look at this topic. And the first thing they realized was we have no experience in this topic, right? Me, our executive director, we've been doing stormwater as an agency since the 1990s. We have hydrology backgrounds. Our board is predominantly lay people. So the first thing the agency did was assign an ad hoc committee of members and say, we need some help here, right? Let's bring in some regional experts. Let's bring in the DEC and the Department of Health, local planners and engineers, and let's talk with the folks that live and breathe this stuff every single day. And also, of course, local officials, business leaders, folks that could be impacted by this. And this group started meeting monthly for 18 months. And at the very first meeting, there was consensus that we need to understand 3 very simple things, right? Let's do a literature review and find out, what do we know about septic systems, right? Can septic systems influence water quality, right? Is this even a problem? If so, let's take a look at the Lake George Basin and see, do we have septic systems in the basin, right? Or do we have a lot? Is this even an issue that could be significant? And last, let's look at management options, right? So if the literature shows that there potentially is impact, if the data indicates we have a lot of these systems that could be at risk, what can we do about it, right? Let's not reinvent the wheel, but let's look at other programs throughout the state and the region. So literature review. I mentioned that septic systems can be very protective of public health. They also do a great job of nutrients if they're designed properly, if they're constructed properly, and if they're maintained. But if they're not, then they can certainly have an impact on water quality with respect to bacteria and nutrients and other issues. And the Environmental Protection Agency suggests that up to 10 to 20% of systems at any time could be in a state of failure, right? So we have a potential source of pollution. Contributing factors for failure and water quality impacts are the density of systems, the age of systems, the soil type that they're in, depth of bedrock, and seasonal high groundwater, these boundary conditions. And interestingly, this one always gets me and others, is the EPA identifies that there's a potential for regional groundwater contamination when there's more than one system per 16 acres. So when we think about our local zoning throughout our towns, particularly along the waterfront, I know in the town I live in and throughout the Adirondacks, it's not 16-acre zoning for a single-family dwelling. So certainly a potential impact there. And lastly, more dirt means more treatment. And no disrespect to any soil scientists that might be here. Basically phosphorus, which is our limiting nutrient for freshwater ecosystems, the last puzzle in the recipe that, really fuels primary productivity is phosphorus. And the retention of phosphorus occurs largely in the unsaturated soils beneath a leach field. There's a little schematic here on the bottom. You can see a house. This is just a typical system for those who might not be familiar. So your house, all your faucets, your toilets, they all drain typically to a septic tank. The septic tank allows solids to settle out, grease and oils float to the top, and then your black water flows to a distribution box, which is typically simple box, not very big, and then there are laterals, lines that go out, perforated pipes that just sit in unsaturated soil, typically on stone, and then the water just leaches into the ground. And so that area beneath the leach field is critical for phosphorus retention. You generally get about 10 to 20% phosphorus retention in the tank, and then the remainder happens directly beneath that absorption area. Or if it doesn't, you can see from the schematic, it has the potential to migrate into groundwater, into surface waters. So we have some examples locally where folks seek to have additional unsaturated soil media beneath these leach fields. So for New York State Department of Health 75A, the bottom of a leach field where that black water comes out needs to be 2 feet above seasonal high groundwater and 2 feet above bedrock. So we're talking 24 inches to go from the most disgusting, stinky, terrible stuff you've ever seen to water that you should be able to drink, which is, amazes me, right? That's nothing short of a biogeochemical blessing. But the more depth we have, the more treatment we have. And we see that the Adirondack Park Agency requires 4 feet of separation to groundwater for conventional systems. The town of Queensbury down here in the southeast corner of our park requires a 3-foot separation in waterfront zones. So we're seeing, as we're looking at the literature, the importance of, seasonal high groundwater and having proper separation. And that, if these things aren't properly designed and maintained, that we can have some impacts. So on to step 2, that was look at the basin itself. So in the Lake George watershed, there's roughly 6,000 occupied parcels in the basin that have septic systems. So that's a fair amount of systems. And 41% of those systems are located close to the water body, right? Within 500 feet of a lake or 100 feet of streams, right? Everybody just wants to be, we love our water bodies. We just want to love them to death and get, be as close to them as possible, right? And consequently, the system density is 3 times higher in the near shore areas than it is as you get further into the upland. So if we're thinking about, the impact of density and things like that, we certainly have an issue. Median parcel size is under an acre. That EPA literature indicated, right, was it 16 acres, right? So we're well below that on these relatively small waterfront lots. And 84% of systems are located in areas that have some type of limiting factor. So this schematic or map on the right shows, it's looking at different environmental factors, boundary conditions. So steep slopes, shallow depth of groundwater, shallow depth of bedrock, things that are not conducive to building a septic system, right? Are these systems at risk? Are there physical factors that make them more prone to failure, or if they do fail, more prone to having some type of impact? And we're seeing the vast majority of these sites are difficult sites, right? If you've been in the Lake George Basin, it's some rugged terrain. So that was not very surprising. And lastly, the average age of a home is 50 years old. So if folks have not updated their system, if we can use the age of the home as a proxy for the age of the system, we have a lot of old systems on rugged sites with small lot size and high density. And so the takeaway was, certainly there appears to be a potential risk here for water quality impacts from septic systems. So then we looked at the management options, right? 13 different management systems were looked at, and throughout all of them, they're all septic inspection, right? That is the one common theme, is to understand how these systems are working, to know if they're functioning properly. You got to pop the hood and take a look at them, right? Similar to our cars and other utilities, right? And in all of these, they're finding the system, they're reviewing for discharges, checking the integrity, checking the leach fields. And some communities have been doing this for upwards of 20 years. And we had the great fortune locally, we have 2 towns, Queensbury, which I already mentioned, and Bolton, that had created some inspection programs upon real estate transfer, right? So instead of the program that the commission chose, right, every time a piece of property changes hands, they require an inspection. And so that's kind of a good way to build into this too. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. And while programs, sort of vary in cost and logistics, they all had that similar theme of, protecting public health and protecting water quality, and they all included routine septic inspection. So it seemed like a pretty clear management path to follow. So as this ad hoc committee and the regional experts coalesce data and put it together, we all put it on the commission's webpage, so that way the committee, the board, and the community could all sort of be looking at the same data at the same time. And spoiler alert, we passed some regulations, right? So in April 2023, last April, we had new regulations for the Lake George watershed. And what it did was it took those 2,500 properties that were close to the lake and close to the streams, so within 500 feet of the lake and 100 feet of protected DEC regulated year-round flowing streams, and said each one of these is going to be inspected once every 5 years in perpetuity. So every year, 500 lucky landowners get a nice letter from us and say, congratulations, this year is your year. So contact your favorite hauler and let us know when they're coming, and we will be sure to have a trained staff member on site to look at your system. And I've got a couple photos here on the right, which are funny. The one on top, so the gentleman all the way on the right is your septic hauler, right? He's working between the tanks. He's got the hose going. The gentleman in the middle is a park commission inspector, so he's on a knee taking notes. And the poor gentleman on the left, who's hunched over, hands on his knees, head down, looks like he's having a bad day. That sadly is the landowner. This particular property, the gentleman, signed up, had an inspection, and didn't realize that he had 2 septic systems. So he signed up for one inspection and ended up with 2 because he had a completely separate system that he didn't even know about, right? And that's key to this program, right? A lot of folks, it's, these things are underground, it's sort of a set it and forget it, out of sight, out of mind. And so, the big part of this program is folks realizing that, they have this infrastructure and that these are utilities that require routine maintenance. On pictures on the bottom, there's the hauler. He's using a camera to scope, probably trying to find the D box. And then on the right is a D box, as I described a little earlier, right? You've got a concrete box, and those pipes are leading out, those laterals are leading out to a leach field where the effluent will be distributed. Funding. So this system, this program is funded by the users of the program. So everybody that is in the program pays an annual fee of $50. Commercial sites have an annual fee of $100, and then holding tanks are half of that, just because we assume there's less involved with the inspection. There's no D-box, there's no leach field. And we basically came to this by figuring out how many staff we would need to do these inspections annually, and then dividing by the number of folks that we thought would be in the program. And so it's really just meant to cover the costs of the program, so that way, it's not meant to be profitable, but just sort of keep the lights on and allow us to get out there and do our work. So what are we looking for? So there's 2 important definitions in the regulations that really focus on the function, size, and location of systems. And the first is a failing wastewater system. And this is exactly what you think it'd be, right? Discharge to the surface, right? Just what you imagine, the terrible stuff. It also involves lack of a soil absorption system, which is something I didn't imagine was possible, but a lot of times there's a tank and there's a pipe and the pipe just ends and there's nothing there. So just lack of some type of seepage pit or a leach field. Metal tanks represent a failure because they deteriorate and they leak. Cesspools represent a failure. That is basically a seepage pit with no septic tank, so you're not getting those solids taken out in advance. It's just effluent going into a hole in the ground. The backup of sewage, right? So basically a failing absorption area that's allowing sewage to back up into a tank or a D box. And then a septic tank that is less than 50% of the required size by Department of Health standards. The second definition is substandard. So these are tanks that are less than 100% of the required size by Department of Health standards. Absorption areas that are less than 75% of the required capacity, or absorption areas that are within 50 feet of Lake George or a regulated stream. And it's important to note here, we do not consider, a failed system is a failed system, but if there's a substandard system, say something with 75% tank size or 50% absorption area, but it received a permit from the local review authorities, so the local town or the county or Department of Health, right? If a local board reviewed this or local staff reviewed this and gave it a permit, then it's exempt from substandard, right? We're not going to send that back to that review authority to look at it again, right? It's already been reviewed by a reasonable group of folks. And potential inspection outcomes and timeframes. So if someone passes their inspection, that's great, right? We see in 5 years, that's what we like to see. There are often repairs needed, so these are generally quick fixes, and then a reinspection. So a lot of times this is something like a distribution box out of level. Failed systems need to be corrected within 6 months, but extensions can be granted. Substandard systems need to be upgraded within 5 years. So this is more like your tank size. So an undersized tank, you have 5 years to bring it up to the spec. And then all upgrades, replacements are permitted by the town, the county, DOH. So the commission does not have any permit review jurisdiction. So we're just doing the inspections, and then any issues found are directed to the town or the municipality. So what did we do? Last year, we had 2 full-time staff, and all our other existing staff, field staff, were cross-trained to make sure if the other folks were busy, we could always provide somebody out on a site so we're not missing any inspections. We conducted 330 inspections in the field. You can see from this chart down at the bottom left, our busiest time was in the autumn. Feedback from folks was they just didn't want to mess up their lawn, right? They didn't want to dig up their lawn in the middle of summer and mess up, a wedding or their vacation or whatever it was. So definitely way busier in the fall. And there was a lot of administrative processing. So although we didn't get to the targeted, I think we were roughly 450 for last year, we learned there were 60 enhanced treatment units. And we learned there were another 75 systems that had recently received a local permit or a local inspection through those real estate transfer laws. So they were accounted for, at least administratively, and we understood that they were in working order. And just, a lot of scheduling, a lot of data management and QA, QC. So certainly pretty heavy on the admin side, as well as the field work. What were our results, right? This is what everybody always wants to know. So 46% passed, right? This is great. Everybody's happy. That guy's happy. The Lorax is happy. Everything's good, right? So the septic size is appropriate. The location's good. It's functioning, right? There's no backups. Everything's working as it should. Needs repair, 16%, right? So this could be inlet or outlet baffles. I mentioned that septic tanks are designed to collect solids and to separate out grease. So these baffles in the top spec, you can see these little T-shaped pipes, right? They're meant to kind of get the water in and separate that scum, separate the sludge, and get the water moving out. And the outlet baffle is really important, right? So that way you're not having that scum layer, that oil and grease go out to your D box and out to your field, because that'll ruin your field. So a lot of them need little repairs like this. Substandard, 15%. So these are undersized absorption areas, commonly seepage pits. Seepage pits, if you look at Department of Health standards, need to be incredibly large in order to accommodate a typical house. And so generally, if we find a seepage pit, then we know it's not going to meet that 75% standard for absorption areas. And undersized tanks are also very common. And failed systems, 23% failed systems, right? So we're talking a lot of cesspools, old metal tanks, and sewage backup. So big picture, we're looking about half pass, and half of these systems that we look at need some type of repair or replacement, which is significantly more than we anticipated with, the EPA and other local programs indicating, 10 to 20% of systems might need some type of repair or replacement. Here we're seeing closer to half. I'm not sure if that's part of, maybe the seasonal nature of the houses around Lake George, where, they started as camps and then they sort of get built out, and you're sort of, you're left with this, old system that was kind of thrown together. Whereas, had it turned over and been a, year-round single family dwelling from the beginning, maybe they would have put a more thought and design into that. And everybody always wants to know, how did they fail? Well, tell us the dirty stuff. What's going on? So vast majority were cesspools, and then also failed absorption areas. A number of no absorption area, which I mentioned, metal tanks, substandard tank size, and just 3 discharges to the surface, which is good. Good that we found them, and good that there was only 3. And what's nice about these, the 3 discharged to the surface were actually quick fixes, right? They had a septic tank, they had a leach field, but there was a disconnect. Picture, a seasonal cabin, and it's up on stilts, right? And you can see underneath the cabin, they had a broken pipe between the cabin and their system that they didn't even know about. One of these was one of our commissioners, one of our board members, who was gung-ho on septic and has put a lot of money into her system and takes a lot of pride in it. And it was something that she didn't even know, was happening, right? So even folks that are mindful and think they're doing the very best, unless you're getting into these systems and taking a look at them, you might be missing something. So what happens after inspection? So we provide a letter to the landowner advising them of the next steps, right? So you've got a failed system, you need to have it fixed by date certain, and you've got a substandard system, you've got 5 years. And we copy the local review authority, so the town, the county, whoever it happens to be, again, because we don't have that permit jurisdiction. We do, however, have design standards. So those regulations, or environmental conservation law rather, directed the commission to include wastewater regs design standards for the whole basin. So while the inspection program only applies to that area within 500 feet of the lake and 100 feet of streams, we do have some simple design standards for new or replacement systems throughout the basin. First is soil, right? More soil, 3 foot of vertical separation to bedrock and seasonal high groundwater from the bottom of the leach field, right? We want that unsaturated soil to hold on to that phosphorus for us. Second, soil absorption area needs to be 100 feet from any stream, lake, or Adirondack Park agency wetland. This is already in the regs, but it seemed worth repeating, particularly for replacement systems. No trench length reduction for enhanced treatment units or open bottom gravelless chambers. So enhanced treatment units, as a general group in Department of Health law, right, they do a great job, right? They reduce biological oxygen demand, TSS, they create a higher quality effluent, but they do not, there's not a standard for phosphorus reduction. So they don't all reduce phosphorus generally as a group by DOH standards, and yet they're allowed to have a smaller absorption area. And so in this case, focusing on phosphorus, that limiting nutrient, that trench length reduction does not apply in the basin. However, there's still some other ways. There are other gravellous systems such as Presbys and Elgins, where if you have a small site, you can still take advantage of some of those DOH standards that allow you to have a slightly smaller field if you have a tight site. Lastly, upon redevelopment, wastewater has got to be brought into compliance with current standards, right? We don't want you to do a tear down rebuild and use the old, 50-gallon drum wastewater system, or use the old Volkswagen Bug septic tank. So if you're investing in the property, in the building, let's do a little bit better for the environment and the wastewater issue. Along those lines, if a system requires a variance or a waiver from any of these Park Commission design add-ons or any DEC or Department of Health sizing standards, then they need to get a variance or a waiver, and there's a do better clause essentially, right? So if you're asking to be 50 feet from the lake, or you're asking for a waiver from vertical separation, which is going to, you know, supposed to help from an environmental standpoint, then try to do something else better, you know, and we framed it to be really broad. So that way we can leave that up to science and the engineering community just to, and this is really meant to just codify, as most of these regulations are. You know, a lot of this has just been done by other folks, and we're just kind of taking the best management practices that work and that others are doing well. But basically, if you're going to seek a variance, try to do a little bit better, right? So whether it's a phosphorus filter or dosing or something, right? Following permit and construction, the landowner provides a copy of their permit, as-built plans to the commission, and then we schedule them out for another 5 years, and we start all over again. So, oh, there's our guy. Look, he went in the tank. Don't do that. That's an OSHA violation, and it's just disgusting. So don't do that. So we did 330 systems last year. We accounted for 465 through administrative, you know, just reaching out, talking with folks. So depending on how you look at it, we got 13 to 19% of the way there in 2023. We continue to work on it nonstop here in 24. That 23% failure rate is a significant challenge, right? That's higher than we expected. And we're seeing a backlog of engineers and contractors. And so luckily the regs allow us to grant extensions to that, you know, pretty rigorous 6-month timeframe. And so we're doing that routinely if people are showing good cause, if they've engaged an engineer and going through the permitting process. And, you know, we ask ourselves, you know, looking at the data, was this the right thing to do for Lake George? And it absolutely was, right? With half of these systems needing some type of attention, it's clear that we're catching a lot of issues and we're preventing a lot of future issues. Now, not everybody has a Lake George Park Commission, right? We're sort of this unique little agency that is watershed specific and kind of crosses political bounds with respect to municipalities. So I threw a couple more slides in here for you guys, and I also do this for lake associations. Like, what else, you know, what else can be done by municipalities and lake associations if we don't have this sort of holistic watershed-based agency? And there's a number of things here, and I'll quickly go through each of them, which I've kind of seen as important. You know, coordinating and building relationships. I took a look at this Screw Lake Watershed Management Plan. You know, if you're a municipality or a lake association, you know, just starting to, and I'm preaching to the choir here, right? This is what you guys do. You talk to each other and have conversations and see what other folks are doing, but just seeing what else is going on around you and having conversations and building relationships. Second is educate, right? A lot of people don't think about their septic system, right? They don't realize the harm that it could do or that it needs to be pumped. I've talked to a lot of people and they're like, oh, yeah, this is a brand new system. It went in 2000 and we haven't had any issues. And they also haven't pumped it, right? You know, DOH recommends these systems get pumped every 3 years. And a lot of people just don't realize that these systems require routine maintenance. The other thing is providing info for short-term rental owners, right? If you're leasing out your house, which is pretty popular in our neck of the woods, you know, have some information out there for folks that are visiting your home who might not be accustomed to using a septic system. So we have through some partners, some educational materials that we maintain on our webpage and people can print out. And then incentivize, right? Subsidize volunteer pump outs. This is something that the Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District did years ago. Said, hey, we've got some money. Let's not be the scary regulatory agency, but let's see if we have some grant money, let's, kind of offset the cost of pumping. Because a lot of times if you just get you get the cap off of one of these things and you find a lot of problems, right? You pump it out and you realize the absorption area has failed, or there's a crack, or, all kinds of things. So just engaging folks and incentivizing them to look at their system and think about it and just get some eyes on it, because you'll find a lot of problems that way. And there's also potential funding sources through soil and water conservation districts. Lastly, you can advocate for limited regulation. We have the whole basin and we focused it on the waterfront. The town of Queensbury here locally is a great example where they don't have a town-wide inspection program, but they have a specific wastewater district on one bay in a town that has probably 8 bays, right? But they just had the political pull, and people were ready to do it in one particular bay. So they passed a law and said, all right, in this bay, we will have a wastewater inspection program. And the other way to do it is, inspection upon real estate transfer, right? That's kind of easy, low hanging fruit. There's house inspections already occurring, and people want to make sure that everything they're buying is good and working order. And so that's a great way where over time, and we're always kind of taking the long view on this, just trying to bend the curve for water quality and do better. That's a great way to build in a septic inspection, in a single municipality and on a lake, the size of Lake Champlain. Is one municipality going to make a difference? It certainly will locally. And over time, as it kind of builds, and it's kind of a nice thing because it doesn't put immediate pressure on anybody, because nobody's, probably a very small fraction of people are looking to sell their house now, right? So it's kind of down the road, somebody else kind of problem. And so those types of things can be easily passed at the local level. It might be easy, more easily to digest, for the local community, but still, long-term make a difference. So with that, I will end there, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you guys have any.
Yeah, hi. This is Bob Fisher. I'm sorry, my camera, I don't have hopefully you can hear me okay. I don't have the best internet here.
I can hear you great.
Yep, and as Lori and everyone knows, I've been on the CAC closing on 20 years now. I helped drive this equation probably to have this discussion, and this is incredible. This is just great. I mean, this is nation leading right here. And thank you for mentioning the OSHA violation. I virtually had a heart attack when I saw that confined space entry there. Sorry. Once again, and many in the CC, but the people that are newer to this, 55% in Vermont are on septic tanks. That is the most in the nation, 99.4%. The last spiel is going to close, go to wastewater plants. The fact that there were 3 discharges to surface public health, that is the public health, but the rest is environmental. And I mean, this is shocking once again, once again, a brand new mound system has to come up with 100 BOD, 100 TSS, that's brand new. My limits are 30-30, and I average like 1 and less than 1 on these things. For a phosphorus, once again, any way you can get people onto systems and off these, and 10% is accurate. I see 10 to 15% failing, but if you do the math, I do for like 24,000 people in South Burlington between Colchester with the 2 facilities that we do, and we put out 410 pounds in 2022. I mean, an average house of 210 gallons per day puts up about 4.4 pounds per year. So if 10 houses are failing, they put out more than my 24,000 people. And I'm not going to start with PFAS and everything else. 55% of Vermont. You want to talk about land application? I know, Lori, and you all know all this, and I appreciate this. This is incredible, the work you're doing here. We can mitigate it at it, and there's incredible advances going on. This stuff's going right into the ground everywhere. You want to talk about land application? I'm not going to start with biosolids, and and my major issue with that was, once again, there is issues. Nonetheless, is all about greenhouse gases. Because as you well know, I do put out drinking water virtually, but obviously a septic tank doesn't, and neither do I by potable water standards, but my numbers are ridiculously low. It's all, as I see the river turn to chocolate, when the rain comes by in a huge storm, it wipes out all the money I spend on my background levels going to the river are lower in phosphorus than the river itself. So sorry to go off, but thank you so much. Because I've been, as you all know, the rest have been here forever. I've been harping on septic systems and the 55% in Vermont, since we're number 1 in the nation, for quite some time. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
Andrew has a hand up. Yep. Andrew, do you want to go?
Oh yeah, sure. I didn't hear you. Yeah, first I just got to say, very ironically, 2 hours ago, I was standing in the field behind my house where we're putting an artist studio in, and we were in the process of hooking that up to the septic tank And so the excavator carefully unearthed around the septic tank to find that it was partially collapsed and pretty much totally failing despite several inspections over the past couple of years. So we're going to put a new septic tank in tomorrow. So I just thought that was ironic that the first topic that came up tonight was about this. Thank you, Joe. Really helpful. I guess, when I'm trying to get my head around this for the Lake Champlain Basin, I go to what's the distance from the shoreline or distance from waterways, lake shoreline or distance from waterways that we would sort of draw the line where we would want to put this kind of attention to it for Lake Champlain. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I know for us, we looked at the soils and the slopes, and there was, as we started going further and further away, the characteristics got better, right? There was more land in order to put in a decent system. And so, we really honed in, partly it's a critical environmental area, 500 feet of the lake for us in our regs. And fittingly, we saw, it seemed less concerning as you got further away, right? There were less, larger lot size, and the slopes weren't quite as bad, and there were deeper soils, and getting away from that density. We also looked at some literature on how far septic plumes, right? How far phosphorus can travel underground, and that is really really depends on the type of soil there is. Now in Lake George Basin, we have non-calcareous soils, right? We have relatively low calcium soils, and which is good news for us. What happens below a leach field, effluent is slightly acidic, and so that causes aluminum and iron to come out of or come into solution, and it precipitates with phosphorus and sort of binds it there. When you get into higher calcium situations, into more alkaline or neutral, then the phosphorus is not bound as permanently as it is in slightly acidic soils, and so you'll have a longer plume. And so generally speaking, I think you guys tend to, tends to be more basic soils in your neck of the woods. So that would be something to look at is, what are your predominant soil types, and look at the literature and see how far might we expect a plume to go if, if we had some issues.
Great, thank you.
Sarita, did you have a question?
Yeah, I couldn't find my hand on this screen. So, when I was a legislator the first year, which was 6 years ago, I submitted a bill based on Act 5 in Massachusetts. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but in Massachusetts, whenever you sell a house, you have to have it inspected. And I talked to a lot of engineers. It was never taken up. It was never taken off the wall. But I guess I have, since you've done it, I'm very kind of excited about your presentation. Since you've already done it, and I'm thinking if I'm reelected tomorrow, I'm thinking of resubmitting this bill. And I'm just wondering about, I have 3 questions. The groundwater piece, even if it's not near water, I'm wondering what data you have about failed systems impacting groundwater. I'm just wondering about workforce, like in terms of the inspectors and the maintenance workers, like did you have to develop a workforce for that? And the other one is, did you get any, or do you know if realtors push back on the sale of house, when a house was sold, having to be inspected?
Yeah, so on the groundwater piece, I'd be happy to share, any of the data that we've collected, the literature, and certainly you always want to, you want to have some separation because phosphorus is not retained as well in saturated soils as it is in unsaturated, so it is more likely to travel subsurface. So that's definitely an issue. Workforce, we operate with 2 basically full-time inspectors, and then, like I mentioned, a handful of us cover if somebody's sick or we happen to get a few, concurrent, inspections that we can't cover with just 2 folks. So it's 2 people, right? It's not 2 full-time seasonal. We did retain somebody all winter just because it's a lot of data, right? You've been to 330 properties and you're sending out notices and keeping up with deadlines. So probably is good to have somebody year round. We are seeing a backlog of engineers and contractors, right? Getting this work done. We've had one engineering office who we do a lot of stormwater work, and they're one of the primary offices that sends in applications to us, and they've stopped doing anything but wastewater, right? So they're just doing septic designs. And so people, and this is going to be, it's a 5-year program, and we're giving some people 5 years to fix it. So it's going to be like this 10-year slug of a lot of repair and rebuilding that needs to occur. And so, although it's a little slow right now, I suspect offices will sort of adapt to that and bring on extra staff. And we know the local haulers have started buying additional trucks and hiring more staff. So, they're starting to adapt to the demand. And lastly, sale, we haven't heard of any pushback. It's sort of a natural time to have inspections, and there's a lot of money changing hands. And so if you're buying, a $500,000 to $1 million house, near Lake George, putting in, if it's a conventional system that costs, $15,000-$20,000, although it's significant, at that time when money is changing hands, it's not, not as big of a lift to maybe somebody in the upland who's not expecting to sell, and, it's more challenging. So, but no pushback so far on the real estate side.
Thank you.
Correct.
Joe, I want to echo the comments that this is just an incredible program. You listed risk factors early in your presentation, and I think one of the biggest risk factors that you didn't mention is owners just failing to inspect their systems, so that it's as you said, out of sight, out of mind, and people just figure it's going to be there forever. You don't have to do anything with it. It's great that there is inspection at property transfer, but I suspect property transfer happens a lot less frequently than you need to inspect systems. And so it brings me to my question, which you may have answered in your last slide, but I'll ask it anyway. Kind of who or what gave the Park Commission the authority to require these inspections? I take it that people can't refuse the inspection, right? So what is the mechanism that allowed you as an entity to be able to do that, and what are the lessons that we can learn going forward in other places?
Yeah, so for us, it's New York State Environmental Conservation Law, Article 43. That's where the commission's responsibilities and duties are kind of outlined. One of them is developing wastewater regulations for the basin. And with the rest of our regulatory programs, we have the ability to, we have director of law enforcement, and we can have fines of up to $500 per violation per day. So that's pretty well established in ECL and our regs for other programs. And so we just added this program in, and it just sort of fell in line with the others. So far, we haven't had to take enforcement action against anybody. We posture it quite a lot, and we write lots of, we're paper tigers saying, here's your 5th warning, but we're getting to the point where, we have, I think, 8 people from 2023 who have not called us or have not done anything. And so now they're getting certified mail, and we're, kind of getting to we don't want enforcement, right? That's not fun for anybody. And
Sure.
This should be, sort of simple and civil and, just the way of doing business. But we do have that mechanism if we need it. We talked about real estate transfer early on and had the same sort of, feeling that, well, it's just not enough, right? It doesn't get us there fast enough. But I mentioned Bolton and Queensbury, they had real estate transfer laws, right? Those were kind of 2 progressive towns. And that really helped us politically to get this other program going, because it allowed people to say, wow, look at the data they're getting. Those numbers are pretty, if this is indicative of the whole basin, right? They're having failure rates or replacement rates at X%. And so, yeah, this is true for our neck of the woods too. And oh, by the way, life still goes on in Queensbury and Bolton, right? These people aren't, putting their houses up, in foreclosure. Like, it's working. And so, it's always tempting to sort of, eat the whole apple at once. But I think locally for us, it really helped us to have these two transfer law programs to kind of show everybody else how this could work. And then that kind of gave us, the political power or the political, what's the word I'm looking for? Buy-in from the communities to be like, yeah, this is necessary and it's not a huge deal. And so that's why I always try to pitch that. And it's easy, right? You go, we went through, we did some stream corridor regs a few years ago. It took us like 3 years, right, to get new, New York State stream corridor regulations in the basin. And then we saw like in an email, Queensbury, the town of Queensbury had just passed one, like in 2 public meetings, right? Like, so in 2 months, they had a reg that took us years, so just, it's a lot easier to kind of accomplish those things at the local level. And so we always encourage that, if that's all you can get now, just as a start, it was really helpful for us to kind of hang on the coattails of those programs.
I wonder if it's possible for us to put together a model regulation that towns could use.
Sure. Yeah, I know, what town? It might be Loon Lake, here in the Adirondack Park. I think used a model ordinance, to start their transfer. They have an inspection program upon transfer. And that's basically what we do. I mean, I used Warren County had come up with an ordinance that they're trying to pass, but it wasn't getting a lot of traction. And, so we just kind of looked around at other programs and other regs, and just sort of pieced them together. But yeah, we can certainly, our regs are publicly available, and I can certainly send along those other ones from, the town of Queensbury and Bolton, and Loon Lake, if that'd be helpful.
Thank you.
There are a couple questions in the chat from Cree. Are mound system septic failures also a problem? And do you discourage garbage disposals to decrease solids?
Yeah, I don't think there's a type of septic system that's immune from failure, right? As Breck noted, some people just don't pay attention to how their systems are working, that they need maintenance. And so, yeah, that's actually, I heard before our program started, being around the basin and working on stormwater programs, engineers being like, oh yeah, so-and-so's mound system, right? They're building a mound because it's a tough site, right? It can't meet vertical separation. And so a lot of times you'll just get the effluent. If it's overloaded, the effluent just kind of seeps out the toe of the slope right at the surface. And so, yeah, they're certainly an issue as well. I don't know that they're any more or less than another type of system at that point. We might get a better feel for that as the program goes on. And what was the second question? I'm sorry.
Do you discourage garbage disposals to decrease solids?
So that is broadly, yeah, it's not a great idea to have a garbage disposal and a septic tank. A lot of these, we show up and it's a 1,000-gallon tank for 3 bedrooms, right? So we're looking at Department of Health standards, and the tank size is dictated by the number of bedrooms. A garbage grinder counts as a bedroom by DOH standards. And so a lot of times we'll show up, these people did the right thing, they got their permits, they, 3 bedrooms, 1,000 gallons, but then, they like garbage disposal, right? They put in a garbage disposal. That's something that we look for during inspection and ask about. So we have had a number of folks where they would have been substandard, but we direct them, or they, rather than replace their septic tank or install, sort of an additional tank to get the volume, they volunteer to take out the garbage disposal. They send us pictures, and then, we just have to trust that they're not going to put it in, and then we did a good job educating them, saying, this is not a good thing for your system, right? The less solids, the better.
Any other questions?
Did Sarita have a question? Is that how you say your name?
Yeah, she asked.
Oh, she did. Okay.
Thank you.
Joe, I was wondering, at the New York CAC presentation over the summer, you talked about some of the challenges associated with the program. Can you touch on some of those?
Sure. One of them is actually that was my colleague Dave Hatton, I think, that spoke at the New York program. But so he's our primary inspector, so he's getting all the most of the complaints and understanding the issues. A lot of it is folks not being prepared for a septic inspection. So we want the inlet and the outlet observation ports to be open for all septic tanks. We want the D box to be exposed. If there's a pump tank, that needs to be exposed. We're looking at alarms. So a lot of times these systems are not prepped when we get there, despite us sending things like, okay, thank you for scheduling, here's what you need to do. You know, we give pretty clear direction, and a lot of times we show up and you're standing there and, you know, they've only got one port open and they can't find the D box. And the hauler's trying to, you know, snake the line to find where the D box is, you know, so a lot of it is just lack of preparation. We're trying to help that by, you know, DOH standards requires that all septic tanks be within 12 inches of grade. There be an observation port within 12 inches of grade. So if folks don't have that, we encourage them to put on a riser so that way they can easily find it next time, and they're not redigging it up. We're not looking for things. Some of the other issues are, let's think. Some people just don't want us there, but most people have been really cooperative for the most part. I'm trying to think of one of our common complaints. I think it's just, yeah, being prepped and ready. You know, we have folks around the water. It is a little tricky with bedrooms. So I mentioned that sizing is based on the number of bedrooms, you know, so Department of Health says 3 bedrooms is 1,000-gallon tank and X amount of leach field, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes up with more and more bedrooms. They don't have a definition of a bedroom. And so, you know, you walk into a vacation house and there's a bed on the front porch. Well, is that a bedroom? I don't, you know, or you walk into a room that certainly could be a bedroom, but it has a desk in it, right? So that's a little challenging, you know, because we don't want to be the bedroom police, and it's not in our reg either. What exactly is a bedroom? And so that from the technical side has presented, you know, it's been a little troubling because we'll say, all right, this is undersized for 4 bedrooms. And then, you know, the landowner takes a bed out of the room and now suddenly it's an office, right? So there's a little wiggle room there, but we try not to dabble at the edges, right? This program is really about finding, you know, failed systems and systems that are being, you know, impactful. And so, you know, plus or minus a bedroom, you know, we're not giving away the farm. And so we just try to kind of keep our focus on, you know, the big things and trying to, you know, create real change, you know, rather than hamstring, you know, a local landowner for, you know, a bedroom that might have a desk in it, you know, and things like that. So we try not to get too nitty gritty. Which is easy for me because I'm you know, I love regulations, but you know, that's Dave comes back to me and he's like, well, you know, so we're always having those conversations as to, you know, how can we be responsible to the reg and the intent, but also not just beat people up, you know, if it's not actually going to make a difference.
Great. Lori?
Yeah, thank you. Joe, thank you. That was terrific, really well organized presentation with some daunting stats. And I love this last slide and the sign. But I'm wondering if you could share with us some of the education and outreach materials that you've put together. You noted that whole program, you know, it seems very comprehensive in terms of raising awareness, but also what you send out to the homeowners to tell them where they are in those 5 years and how they can prepare. I think that would all be useful for us as we hopefully contemplate and move forward in something useful for Lake Champlain.
Absolutely. We can absolutely do that. Yep. And people are always asking, well, why am I year 1? Why couldn't I be year 5? You know. For that, we honestly we didn't want to we just took 20% of each municipality. So that way we're not doing 500 in Queensbury and just overwhelming their planning department, right? So that way we're kind of spreading the wealth around the municipalities. And then where we could, we tried to gather individuals in certain neighborhoods. So that way maybe they could share a hauler, right? A hauler could do, you know, pump for 2 neighbors and maybe have some cost savings there. Maybe be an efficiency for us on the inspection side, but yeah, I can absolutely send those educational and outreach materials after today.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yep.
Any final questions? All right, thanks,
So
Joe.
much, Joe.
Oh,
Sure thing.
No, go ahead.
nope.
Thank
You
you.
can have the meeting back, Denise.
No, you're doing great, Katie. I just landed where I needed to go, so thank you so much. Okay. What's our next agenda item, Katie? I don't have it pulled up in front of me right now.
Action plan.
No,
Yeah,
I knew it.
Joe,
I just didn't
you're
wanna
free to
say it.
go.
you.
I'll follow up with you for some of those materials.
Okay.
And yeah, really appreciate your time this evening and lots of good discussion.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. It was nice talking with all of you, and contact information's here, and I'll get you some materials shortly.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Take care.
We appreciate it. Thank you. All right, so we're working on our 2025 action plan. I just want to thank everybody who's been attending the, what are we calling them? Study halls or
Drafting sessions.
rafting sessions, and kind of where we're landing. I think it looks great. I think it's got a fresh new look. It's longer than the last few we've done, which I'm not opposed to. I don't know, Katie, do you just want to scroll through? Does everybody see the screen?
It's still 2 pages. It's just it's one piece of paper, but folded in half. So it's it is bigger, but still has it's not
What's the
overwhelming.
size of the paper?
That's a good question. I don't have the physical copy on me right now, but I can get those details from Elizabeth.
Like an 11 by 17 kind of
Yeah,
folded in
yeah,
half? Okay.
that sounds right.
Yeah, has everybody had a chance to review this?
It looks great.
Yeah, it does look good.
Yeah, I'll just say that today is the time for high-level red flag reviews, not major changes to the text, unless there's something like inflammatory in there that somebody thinks we really need to get out of there. I think, smaller wordsmithing things are okay too at this stage, as long as we're not getting wrapped around the axle on tiny details. Formatting questions and concerns are also welcome. I'll just highlight a couple of things that I noticed. So there's a missing and over here, so we'll add that in. I wondered in this last sentence, we have a shared responsibility to recommit to actions and proactive investments that will create positive outcomes for our shared clean water resource. Should probably be resources, and the ecosystems surrounding it. I wondered if we wanted to add communities in that, so it brings in the human component as well as the environmental.
That sounds good. And can we get rid of one shared, not say shared twice?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Makes sense to me.
Graphic, sorry, just this, I don't know if this is high level enough, Katie, but the graphic, the Venn diagram getting lost in the weeds up there. I don't know if it's gonna, once it's printed, if it's gonna be visible enough. Specifically water management and flood management, if that's, and climate resilience, I don't know. That feels a little busy to me, but.
I have it printed out. It looks okay to me.
Does it? Okay. It's not, it doesn't like get rid of the translucency of the visual.
Not significantly.
Okay. As long as you can read the words, then I'm fine.
I have a question regarding the visual. This is Randy Brock. As I look at the visual, both on my screen and I also printed it out, I found it more difficult to read than I would like. And this is particularly true where there is so-called dark or black lettering on the white surface. And when you looked at things like, the page talking about riparian and floodplain restoration, for example, I didn't find enough contrast to be able to read it comfortably on screen. And I didn't find it overly contrasty at all in the printed version. Now, maybe others got a different result than I did. The lettering basically was gray over white rather than black over white, and the contrast was such that I found it difficult to read.
Yeah, I think that may be because even though it's actually 11 by 17 of the 2 pages showing right there, it's fitting in a smaller space. Like the first and last page read a little better on mine. Oh, it doesn't look like that's true on that one. So maybe that's not the issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought it was a printer issue because I printed the 11 by 17 on 8.5 by 11. But you're
one of
right.
the things that the only reason I raise it is we actually want people to read this.
Right.
And I found it a little bit discouraging or to continue reading because of that contrast issue. And I'm just wondering if I'm the only one who saw that, though.
No, but I mean, I agree, and I think that we should make it as easy to read as possible. I guess I agree with you, Senator Brock. So yeah.
I guess I would try to see the printed issue.
Agreed.
Mine on page 4 actually printed out great. It reads well, but it's a lot more clear than what it looks like on the screen here.
Yeah, I can talk to Elizabeth, and it might be a gray instead of a black, and maybe the black will show up a little crisper. So I'll work with her on that and let her know.
Well, you know, as we think about who is actually going to use this and how they're going to use it, I think it's important. And I just think from the standpoint of legislators, it is likely that they're going to read it on screen as opposed to carrying a lot of papers for this and everything else along with them. And we want people to, as much as possible, to read these things.
Lori?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'm just wondering, I assume this has been done, but maybe not, that you used, the accessibility color guidance for contrast and for people with, color sensitivities or color blindness. I mean, it's pretty commonly used, and I know I've done other things with the Basin program, and we jointly do that, but I just check in with Elizabeth on that, particularly with these notices about contrast too, and the Venn diagram.
Yep, can certainly do that. I did have a question about the Venn diagram, if folks were okay with the language in there, or if I know I don't think this has changed much since the draft Breck prepared, which is fine. I just wanted to make sure that we're good with that being the final version.
I'm muted. I thought we did talk about the Venn diagram and added some different language to it. So I like it right now. I think it's great.
Great. And I saw Andrew put a thumbs up.
I think I would only suggest moving it up a little bit more so that it's not like it fits perfectly within the picture.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The other thing is, I wonder if you changed everything to white, except for maybe a healthy future for Lake Champlain that was black in the middle. Maybe just try a different font color. Maybe it would stand out a little better.
Yeah, that or perhaps bold the black lettering. But definitely something to increase the contrast, as people are suggesting.
Agree with all of that. Oh, Andrew's hand is up again.
Yes, page 2 in the blue box, 2025 priorities. The first listed bullet, first bullet. I'm wondering whether we could add wetland to that list. So advanced flood mitigation, climate adaptation, and resilience through riparian wetland and floodplain conservation. Just adding wetland to the natural community type that we want to have on that list. Just a thought. Certainly want to keep restoring wetlands as well.
Oh yeah, I think as long as that doesn't offset the formatting too much, I think that'll be a fine addition. And we don't call it out specifically in this header here for riparian and floodplain restoration, but wetlands are called out in the subtext. Another question that I had for folks, so in this membership list, you have your sort of expertise affiliation next to your name, and historically that's just been a way to show the breadth of expertise and perspectives that are represented on the committee. It's not necessarily showing your particular organizational affiliation. So I would just ask folks to take a look at that and send me your preferred technical affiliation to include on that within the next week or so. I'll include that in the follow-up materials. Another question I had, so Representative Dolan is not running for re-election, and so I've not included her name in the members, as she won't be one of our legislative members in 2025, but I wasn't quite sure how to handle the list of members since we don't know who our new representative will be on the committee. So curious to hear what folks might have to offer on that one.
Could you put Representative Dolan's name and then like parentheses RET, retiring or something? I don't know. That's just off the top of my head.
Actually, I like that because it shows, sorry, I like that because it shows that she was in on this. So you could even put former or FMR or something.
Provided
Yeah,
she's
I agree
comfortable
with that.
and has signed off on it. And I don't know her level of participation, or if she's left the CAC. You know, I just think we want to be mindful of that and check in with her.
Yes.
Kind of the flip side of that is that I don't think we need to worry too much about who the next representative would be, because they were not involved in the development of this iteration of it. So.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts on these 2 pages?
Again, sorry. I don't have the printed version, so I'm hoping that that square with the recent one-time appropriations of 2 point blah, 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 blah. That just seems typically in those types of boxes, you have a very big font with a little bit of information. This looks like way too much information in that it's not, I don't know, it's, I would rather see less text, bigger font, because it almost matches the font. It's smaller than the font of the text. Usually it's the opposite. So that's my only, like, I can't read it and it feels, I know we wanted to put that in there. I just don't know if that's the right location or if it makes sense. And if I'm the only one that feels that way, tell me and that's fine, but.
I would be curious to know which sentence you would cut out of there.
I can't, I'm like blowing it up so I can read it. So,
yeah.
One-time appropriations of 2.1 million by the Vermont legislature for me. Requesting 43.
I just wonder if you, that's a really good point, Denise. And I wonder if you could cook that down to something, and I don't have it yet in my head, but something to the effect that you know, requests for funding from the Working Lines Enterprise Board exceeded what was available by 5 times, you know, kind of period. Fewer of the numbers in there, and if those numbers are important, then to get them maybe into the text.
Yeah, and I think we had talked about whether these should just be talking points or whether they should be present in the text like this. And I think some folks wanted to try to have as many of the talking points in the physical text as we could, but I think we're seeing now that that might not be the way to go.
We asked our scientist at the Basin program to synthesize that into data speak, just like Breck tried to do now, right? Like that, yeah, that's what's coming in my mind too. Like 5 times the amount or something, whatever it is, whatever the math is.
Yeah, and it's a little messy because yeah, there are 5 categories of this grant, and just one category alone totaled over that 16.2. So I would need to think on that a little bit more, but can figure that out.
Well, is it possible? I mean, it must be possible for you to say what was the total amount requested in this program and the total amount that was awarded, and just that ratio.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, so this was all sent to me by Nina Gage, and so this text was taken just pretty much directly from the email that she sent. So I think that data is available. I just don't have that number presently. But I can get that.
Great. Thanks, Katie. It's exactly, just make it more concise and bigger so it looks, so it's legible.
Right, anything else on this page? Or these pages?
So is that from the flooding 2023?
Yeah.
2024. Oh,
I'm not sure which flood this is from one of them. I can ask Elizabeth which year that's from, and maybe we can just put that in the credit.
that. I know what the picture is of. I can't really tell.
I think that's Waterbury, isn't it? I'm guessing it was probably July of 23.
Those are the Waterbury offices right there, that round thing. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I think that might be nice to say what it is and when it was. I think you're right, Wayne.
In the last version of the plan, we had some strategic bolding of requests and key phrases. I didn't attempt that at this stage because it seemed like half of these paragraphs would have to be bold to capture the whole ask. So I'm curious how you're feeling about it without that formatting distinction this time around.
Do the blue
As long as
capitalized headings not provide that information?
Yeah, I think they do. They provide some of that. Last year, it was even more like basically like the CAC endorses investment in nature-based solutions, like that ask would be bolded, but I think it would just be too much.
And there is already the Vermont must part in blue.
Martine?
Thanks, Katie. I think I see a period that doesn't need to be there. In the riparian and floodplain restoration paragraph, the 5th line up, and protection period and severity. Do you see that?
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Move us down to the last page.
Katie, it's Hillary. Are we doing, like, do you want small edits right now? Like,
Yep.
or do you already email them? So when you go back up to that last page, under ag, the second line, it says, and on-farm pollution prevention projects, and I wasn't sure if it was and on-farm pollution prevention or and on-farm pollution prevention. Seems like it should be on-farm
programs and on-farm.
So like with a hyphen?
Maybe so,
Dash.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I think so.
The other was just, sometimes there are commas before ands, and I saw one without, so just maybe making sure that we're consistent.
Yeah, I was just to follow up on the recent comment about what the ask is in each of these categories. It would be nice if that was identified separately. I don't know if you could put it in a box or something like that, because it tends to be at the end of each kind of paragraph here. But some people reading this may just go to the header and then want to go directly to the ask without reading all the text. So it'd be kind of nice if that maybe stood out a little bit more clear.
Yeah.
Anybody's got any thoughts on that?
I agree.
Like a box or just highlighted or
Yeah,
bolded?
bold or italicize it.
But italics or just, I don't know, I'm open to suggestions, I guess, but I think it'd be great just to make sure that's very kind of clear, jumps out, because some people may not read all the text, but at least they can look at the bulleted, header and say, okay, this is what the real ask is here.
Yeah, I agree. Remember, I've always said truncate, for 15 plus years now, make it shorter, sweeter. So that's a good addition. Thank you, Wayne. I believe.
I think one of the issues is that just some of the sections have much clearer asks than others. Like for example, in this aquatic connectivity for resilience, it's really just one sentence. So I guess that whole thing would be italicized or pulled out.
Agree. I think the last page is probably a little easier to do that, Katie, because I think the ask is kind of like the last sentence in each category.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know, just a thought, suggestion, and maybe play with the text or something so that stands out a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because this second or this third page is really all a subset of this priority. So these pieces are all in bold. So yeah, if we just do that, that would still be consistent. Okay. Sorry, just thinking through out loud.
Katie, it is. I mean, I don't know whether you want to go to this trouble, but just looking at that aquatic connectivity and resilience, it would be possible to put it into the form we're talking about by starting that out by saying that dam removals and right sizing of culverts is necessary, blah, 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 and then say the CAC endorses restoration of aquatic organism passage to accomplish this. So it could be done.
Any other thoughts?
You done?
Yeah, I think this is great.
Yeah, looks great.
Andrew?
I'm excited. All right, now we got to talk about how we're rolling it out, people. What's our plan?
Andrew has a hand up.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, Andrew, go ahead. I
Went
can't
to
see
raise-
you right now.
Went to raise my hand and I exited out instead. I don't know how I did that. The riparian and floodplain restoration paragraph, a little past halfway down, talks about, let's see, full funding for the Department of Environmental Conservation. Should that, some of the things that you're talking about there, I think of as the responsibility of the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department, and so maybe that should just be ANR. I maybe I have that wrong, but that's
I think you do have that wrong.
okay.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if it's a problem to change that to ANR. I think we changed it from, we had listed several programs within DEC, and Julie recommended changing it just to DEC programs. She didn't call out like, and we had folks.
We had River Corridor. We had like a bunch. Right, you're right. We had the
Yeah,
programs
and the
Okay.
there, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a critical thing to me. I mean, I think when I think about nature-based solutions, I think about activities that are done by Vermont Fish and Wildlife, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. And
Andrew,
if Julie recommended it, I would stick with that.
I think part of the reason that was in there originally also is that we were thinking about the funding, that formula grant funding and the enhancement grant funding that's coming through DEC to partners to implement projects, and how sort of that lack of cohesion at DEC was causing it to be challenging to use those funds, and the fact that they're so understaffed can make it challenging too. So that was where DEC was specifically being targeted. But I agree with you that ANR could be I mean, I don't disagree that Fish and Wildlife is important too.
Correct.
Yeah, as is Department of Transportation. I wonder if that should just be replaced with state agencies and programs, as opposed to calling out the Department of Environmental Conservation.
How would folks feel about that? Hillary?
I guess it just feels to me like there's a particular problem at DEC that isn't shared as much across other agencies that makes it really hard to work with them. So that's where this had kind of come from, I think, initially. So I guess I sort of feel like DEC is like, if they might get watered down a little bit, that message that we need help at DEC specifically, because they hold the grants to the sort of watershed partner group. But that's just a little background and what I think.
So maybe we'll leave it as written and can sort of call out different agency collaborations in the presentation if that's relevant. Any other final remarks? I think the big takeaway is that we need to increase contrast and readability in a couple of different ways. So I'll work with Elizabeth on that, including synthesizing that call out box a little better and making things a little bit more readable.
I would just add one more thing about the paragraph that we just talked about. Just
Yep.
look at the number of words in that sentence.
Yeah, it's not short.
It's very, very long. And in terms of, the ability to comprehend what we're saying, shorter sentences and things like this work better. And you might just think about how to break that up to make it more readable.
Hillary?
Yeah, I agree. And I think you could probably put a period after protection. And then it also says and severity of extreme participation events. I think it should say and as severity there too, as we're looking at that sentence.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Senator Brock knows this stuff exactly, and maybe just that last sentence should be broken to bullet points. That last little paragraph, boom, 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 and bolded or something. I'm just trying to say and once again, it's going to be hard to read it all. You have to think about me. I'm like at the second grade level.
Yeah, I think at one time these were probably two separate sentences since there is that rogue period next to protection already. So maybe we'll just delete and then it would say as severity of extreme precipitation events increases, swift action and investment are needed to ensure our community's environment and economy are more resilient to climate change impacts. So then it'll be two sentences.
Good.
Great. Bob, is that a new hand?
No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Yeah. I'm going back to the original one. We should just try to maybe highlight the end of the most important bullet point in each topic. That's it. Thank you.
Nish, should we vote on this pending some light text and formatting edits?
Yeah. I mean,
I'll make a motion that we approve the draft action plan subject to the edits discussed.
I guess I'll look for a second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
So will there be an opportunity to look at it again, or are we approving it, as to go forward?
I'll send it out. And I think, I think the expectation will be that folks will give it one final review. If, again, look out for rogue periods, those kinds of things. Hopefully that will all be sorted. But yeah, again, not expecting substantial text edits at the final review stage.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think if people once you send it back out, Katie, if people could just take a fine tooth comb to it, the more eyes on it, the better. Sometimes you read something over and over and it just gets, but this is very exciting. And it's only November 4th, so we're crushing it. It's a lot of work. I just want to say the CAC puts this out every year and it is a lot of work, and but it's absolutely worth it. It is our charge to do this. So I really appreciate all of the people and everybody who's continuing to engage in this and making this a priority for committee.
I think we're still halfway through the vote.
Oh, I thought we were in discussion
Okay,
period.
great, good.
I'm
Just
still
wanted to-
discussing. I'm discussing.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Anyone? Thanks for, okay, all those in favor. I know I was totally lost track, Katie. Sorry, I thought we voted. All those in favor of approving the action plan with the edits and then maybe one final review. But no
Aye.
major.
Aye.
Aye. All right, okay. Great work, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Any opposed? Am I supposed to ask that question too? Does anybody oppose? No? Okay. Good. Okay, so now do we want to talk about the rollout? Katie, I think that's like our next step because I think our December meeting is what we're proposing.
Yep.
Be our public meeting for this.
Yep, so that's
And that's
December 9th.
December 9th. It's a Monday night. We're proposing somewhere in Chittenden County again, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Have we made any progress on locations?
Yeah, so first I confirmed with the Basin Program staff that they're available to do a State of the Lake presentation associated with this, so that's good. Folks have that date on their calendar and are holding that for an in-person event. Couple of things, I reached out to some breweries to see if we could change up the location a little bit this year. A lot of them are pretty cost prohibitive with, again, catering exclusivity seems to be the Achilles heel on these things. So, and pretty high hourly fees that I don't think are realistic for, I don't think we'll get it through the state process in time. So thinking about the Basin programs budget process going through NUIPIC, I don't think we'll have enough time to get those high numbers through either. So the 3 places that are on the table right now, the Sailing Center is available again. They again have no restrictions on the caterer, what kind of refreshments we can bring in. So we had a pretty good spread last year and good turnout. I know it was a little tricky with the space in the room. It was pretty crowded. We got a lot more folks than originally anticipated, which was great, but I know it was a little cramped in there, so might not be the best space. Main Street Landing also has a couple of different rooms that might be good for us. They have the great room, which fits 60 people seated and 80 people standing, and that is $300 with their nonprofit rate. And again, they have no exclusive catering either, so that works well for us. They also have the lake lobby, which can fit 100 people seated or 200 standing, and that's 400. And the Basin program has done events through Main Street Landing before, so I think that contracting language wouldn't be too hard to get through NUIPIC. Burlington Beer Company was available with a nonprofit rate of an hourly fee of $100 an hour, but they have a food and beverage minimum of $400 an hour with a 20% gratuity, and you can only bring in desserts as external food. Otherwise, you have to use their catered menu. So because of that, I am inclined to pursue either the Sailing Center or Main Street Landing again, but I'm curious if folks have preferences or other locations. Denise?
I just want to ask Lori a question because I think the reason we had so many people that showed up at the Sailing Center last year was because of Lori's outreach. And I just want to, I guess I'm going to ask, are you willing to do that outreach again for us this year?
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to do that. And in terms of those venues, I think it's better for us as the CAC to, be publicly oriented and not incurring those big costs. I don't think we need to, I don't think that's going to be what gets us a better turnout. I think it'll also be a little more challenging because it's in December rather than earlier. Yeah, but yeah, definitely happy to do, to co-sponsor and help get and do outreach for it.
I'm assuming the Basin program would also post, like do a promotion around it. I mean, I love the Sailing Center. I just felt like that space was a little awkward and just very tight, and just even getting up the stairs, it felt a little inaccessible if somebody had wheelchair needs or something like that. So that was my only think about it, I think Main Street Landings, that sounds like, and I don't know that we need the bigger one. I think the smaller room is fine but I do think we should have some chairs for people to sit in. That would be my suggestion. If we could pursue that one, and then if we could bring in our own food, but there's other hands up, so I'll shut up because I'm just facilitating. Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, just curious, Echo, is that an option at all? I have no idea cost, logistics, just question.
Yeah, Echo last year volunteered to donate the space, which was awesome, but they have an exclusive caterer that was just prohibitively expensive.
Okay.
Katie, did you try Black Flannel Brewery out in Essex?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, it's between that very short period for restaurants between Christmas or Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it's a really short season this year. Not that they're always busy on Monday nights, but I think they're trying to get as much money as they can for this time of year.
Hillary?
Yeah, I agree with what Denise said too about it's just being a little bit awkward upstairs. I don't know, maybe it was ADA compliant, but I wasn't sure about that. And then the parking lot too was pretty dark, and like I got there a little bit late, so I had to park pretty far away, and I was kind of walking in the dark by myself. And I remember just thinking that was a little bit like I wasn't even sure it was the right place at that point. So I don't know if the other one, the Main Street Landing, is a little bit more accessible or not, but seems like it'd be worth trying.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't reached out to them yet, but based on their online calendar, it looked like at least one of those two spaces should be available. So I will do that outreach tomorrow morning, and then if all else fails, we have the sailing center as backup. I'm not sure whose hand was next.
I'll just say it's Bob. Good grief, you answered every question, Katie. Nicely done once again. Good. Yeah, this one I went there, I checked it. Yeah, nicely done. Nicely done. Thank you, Katie.
Andrew, I think
yeah, I'll jump in. I've hosted a meeting at Main Street Landing, and they were great to work with, and I think the space is good and pretty convenient and definitely accessible. There's an elevator that goes up from the lower level, so but I think that's a good choice.
Lori?
Yeah, I think it's a great place to be, and it has that the meeting space before the auditorium, which would be good for displays and for food and be less crowded. There is the elevator. It just needs a lot of signage when people go, to give them access to the elevator, and when you get up, and even guidance on which floor it's on, because it's not that obvious. And I've been there for numerous meetings and always find people wandering around in the halls a little lost. So I think on each level, you want to be redirecting people. So lots of signs.
Okay, yeah, and maybe we can station some basin program staff in different spots.
That's a great idea. Yeah,
that's great. I like that though, Lori, having like places like a table to put stuff out too. So that's actually a really good point. Some of your stuff, I guess any organization that would want to, put some stuff out. Maybe some clean water board activities or whatever. People could have tables. It's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, decide what you want on that. We have actually a native aquatic plant display where we could bring, materials, but I know we'll co-sponsor, but it's also the CAC show. So decide, let us know what you would want to do there.
Wayne, was that a new hand?
Yeah, I was just, not to throw another, Queen City's got a pretty good event space on the right-hand side next to Pizza. The parking down there on Pine Street's a little bit limited, but anyways, it's just another option.
Yeah, parking is the only reason I didn't reach out to them. Breck?
Yeah, just to be a burr in the saddle. All of these venues are great for me because they're right here in Burlington and they're right on the lake. But in December at 5 o'clock, you're not going to see the lake anyway. And I'm just wondering, to emphasize that everybody needs to be in this sort of thing. What about a venue that's not by the lake? So something that's in Montpelier or whatever. I would have to drive to that. But are there other venues that we could get that are, deeper in the watershed, but would perhaps draw another audience?
Yeah, I think we had talked about that initially, rotating it to different spots through the watershed annually. Part of the reason I think that we're sticking to Chittenden County is also because most of the presenters are Chittenden County based, and we're doing some work after hours trying to be aware of that as well. So yeah, I don't know, Lori, you have a hand up, so I'll let you go. You're on mute.
I think that's a great point, and we have done this over the years. We made a concerted effort many years ago to keep moving around and holding public meetings at different times of the year. And I think that's a great idea to do and think about that, particularly in the summer when travel is easier. I think one of the challenges this year is that we're holding that meeting in December. So we have a weather issue, and I totally hear your point, Breck, but I would worry about travel. I think we want to stay in a concentrated population hub to try and get more people. And even if we went, to I don't know, we could go to St. Albans, and Denise, if you feel like we could turn people out there too. But I think
that's yeah. I mean, I think one of the hopes of this last year, anyways, what we talked about, Breck, was getting legislators from Chittenden, Addison, and Franklin County, and so Chittenden's just kind of that central location. I think we had Senator Brock from Franklin. I don't know that we got any others, and I don't know that we had anybody from Addison. We did get quite a few Chittenden County reps and senators that came. And, if we had more time, could we do this a few different times throughout the watershed? But I think the population base is in Chittenden, so it's just an easy place to host it.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
And agree, I think doing some more public, we used to move our CAC meeting around the state. Like we would go down, I remember we went down, we're in Addison County, we went to that super cool place where the birds go. I can't remember what it is. Lori will remember. Anyways, we used to meet all over this was before COVID, when we had in-person meetings. We met in Shelburne for a while. Remember at the Shelburne's town offices for a while. Anyways, we've met up here. We've met at the Tyler place.
We met in Rutland as well.
Oh yeah, we've been all over.
Yeah. And yeah, we met at the the Hannaford Center in Middlebury too. We did really try and move things around. We've met in other places in Addison County.
I think, since we have the meeting owls now, that could be something worth, and I know Carol brought this up at the CVNHP Summit, rotating the meetings again, but having dedicated CAC members, some at least, commit to attending a meeting in person. So I'm not there alone with the owls. But I guess it does bring up a good question. Denise, Karina, and I had talked about doing this meeting just as an in-person meeting, but do we want to do it as a hybrid in case of weather concerns? I could see it either way, so just want to raise that to the group.
Hybrid meetings are hard, but I think that if the Main Street landing, if that's where we end up, can accommodate, I think it's a good idea. I do think as many members of the CAC should try to attend in person if at all possible.
Agreed. And one more thing about that place, have an IT person on staff. I have been there when a number of times when there's been some sort of IT issue. And these are things that were already checked out beforehand. So just having that so that goes as smoothly as possible would be great. But you do have a lot of opportunity to have a big screen there. So I think having hybrid option is, again, it's a accessibility thing too. So we should endeavor to do it if we can.
Public outreach. Then next what we do is we actually go to the State House. And we've done that different ways over the years, specifically during COVID. There is you can log in now pretty much easily to any meeting, right? Committee meeting. So what typically happens is Katie, and I think just Katie, poor Katie, has to set up all of these meetings with the committee for us to go to the State House and share our action plan. We've gone as late as late February, and we're trying to move that up. So the January frame is when we're looking at. And so you typically ask like what weeks work for us, right, before you start scheduling those. We also meet with the governor, the lieutenant governor, and some cabinet members of the governor. And then 4 or 5 committees typically host us. We also put the action plan in all of the legislators' boxes so that they all have a copy of it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we do for the to like get the action plan out in front of, and then typically what we do is not everybody obviously can go to all of the committee member meetings. So then we break out who's going to say what and talking points and things like that, which I would like to tighten up a little bit this year so that they're more concise.
Yeah, and it's within the statute for the CAC that the meetings happen in January. So we used that last year in our requests to the legislative committees to get on the schedule sooner. So I think unless there are major conflicts, we'll probably target the last week of January again. That way we still have some time to prepare, but we get it done early. And if not the last week of January, then hopefully within the first 2 weeks of February. Wayne?
Yeah, Katie and Denise, just to let you know, I'm not going to be available for any in-person stuff probably from the end of December through mid-April.
Are you leaving to go somewhere warmer, Wayne?
Yes, I am. It's going to be, yeah, I will be.
Gonna miss the best time of year in Vermont, winter.
Maybe we have some snow this year. I can fly up for skiing, but I will not be here in person.
Well, maybe you can join us on Zoom. You can zoom in from your golf cart. That's fine. Thank you for letting us know. Any other major conflicts for people in January?
Not January, but unfortunately I'm at a professional meeting that week of the 9th of December, so I won't be able to be at the public launch. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm out the last week in January, Bob Fisher. You know, the last Monday through Wednesday for the NWEA conference.
Oh, right. That always falls kind of at that same time.
I've made all the other ones. Usually, the earlier the better we do it.
Lori, is there a benefit for us going to the water caucus while we're?
I think we can meet, you know, I don't know if we have to do that. Both Karina and I are on the water caucus, and so I think we can certainly share the action plan with the water caucus at an upcoming meeting. I can see when that would best fit for their agenda. We're not meeting, we typically meet once a week. During the session, we're meeting monthly now, and some of our task forces are meeting, you know, more frequently, but we're Yeah, and we have a pretty tight agenda for December, but I can check in as to when that would be best. And I noted this to Katie, I think in leadership before, I won't be in the watershed in that, winter time period either, but I can certainly participate via Zoom for anything that's appropriate for that.
Thank you.
So in our last minute, I did just want to highlight a couple of updates from the Basin program. We have several RFPs open right now, including our education and outreach large and small grant programs. We have new for the Basin program, we have 2 economic assessment RFPs, one for a watershed-wide economic assessment, looking at the value of clean water and healthy ecosystems to our regional economy, and then another looking at the community level for lake direct communities. And so I think our research projects are still accepting proposals till the end of the week. So please share those open opportunities with folks who might be interested. Breck, you have a hand?
Yeah, most of you may have already seen this, but the Vermont Climate Council is having a series of public input sessions. These may be less important for you folks, but maybe to pass on to others. I'll put in the chat here, coming up over the next week or two, climate action inputs for sessions for transportation, for rural resilience, businesses, and so forth. You can see the times and dates there, and the link there will lead you to the calendar, which has the exact times that those public input sessions are happening.
Andrew?
Yeah, that was just a really good reminder from Breck. I meant to mention that earlier, that's a pretty important chance to provide some input to the groups that have been working on revising the climate action plan, and there are agriculture and forestry, and forestry also includes natural lands and conservation, and that might be a pretty good place to really talk about water quality and resilience. I'm trying to do that on my role on that committee, but it'd be good to hear that from others as well.
Katie, could I ask that you clip that piece out and maybe send it around to folks as an email?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and then I'll send that in an email, and I'll also send a reminder that if you're planning to submit per diem or reimbursement requests for any meetings or CAC business that you've attended between August and October, I think maybe July. I don't remember the dates off the top of my head, but it's in the email, and I'll send it again in the fresh email. But I'm asking for folks to send that by the end of day tomorrow. If you need more time, let me know, and we can accommodate that. But just trying to stay on a regular schedule with submitting those. I know I asked for an update on the status of the last submitted reimbursement request, but haven't heard back on that yet. So I assume those are in the queue with the business office if you're still missing a check.
Efficient committee. I'm excited to see the new plan. Anything else before we wrap up at 7:02? All right, well, have a great rest of your evening. And we'll see you on December 9th, if not before. And if there's any other catches that you see on the action plan, please get that to Katie. And we'll have printed copies at the meeting on the 9th. And Katie, you'll send out details on where it's going to be. And also just once we have the details on where it's going to be, if people could commit to sharing that with their networks, that would be amazing. So we have a good turnout.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a fun election day tomorrow.
Oh.
Sorry.